You pick up a cup. You drink. You don't think about it. But that single action connects you to something so old it existed before your species did, older than language, older than fire, older than the first stone tool anyone ever chipped into shape. Your relationship with alcohol didn't begin at a bar, or a vineyard, or even a civilization. It began in a forest, and it began by accident. About 10 million years ago, your distant ancestors were moving through tropical forests in Africa. Fruit was everywhere. But some of that fruit had fallen from the trees and been sitting on the warm ground for days. Inside it, something invisible was happening. Wild yeast was breaking down the sugars, and the fruit was beginning to ferment. It was producing tiny amounts of ethanol, the same compound in every alcoholic drink ever made. When your ancestors ate that fruit, they felt something, a warmth, a looseness. They didn't understand why, but their brains registered it as a reward. And so they kept seeking out that overripe, slightly rotten fruit on purpose. In 2014, evolutionary biologist Matthew Kerrigan and his team published research showing that around 10 million years ago, primates developed a genetic mutation, a change in a single enzyme called ADH4, that made them roughly 40 times better at metabolizing ethanol than their ancestors had been. Your body didn't just stumble into alcohol. It adapted to handle it. That adaptation is still inside you right now. So by the time modern humans appeared, roughly 300,000 years ago, the biological pull toward alcohol was already ancient history. The only question left was when someone would figure out how to make it deliberately. The answer came from a cave. In the hills above Haifa, in what is now northern Israel, there is a cave system called Raqefet. Around 13,000 years ago, a group of people called the Natufians were using it. They were not farmers. They had no permanent settlements, no fields, no domesticated crops. They moved with the seasons and took what the land offered. But inside Raqefet, archaeologists found something that changed the entire story of early human behavior. Stone basins carved directly into the rock floor, and inside the residue of those basins, traces of starch from wheat and barley that had been deliberately soaked, sprouted, and fermented. These people were brewing beer in a cave 13,000 years ago, before agriculture, before pottery, before almost everything we associate with settled human life. Researcher Li Lu from Stanford University led the analysis of those stone basins. Her team concluded that the Natufians weren't accidentally stumbling onto fermentation. They were deliberately producing it, most likely for use in ritual gatherings and ceremonies. Brewing wasn't a side effect of civilization. It came first, and about 1,000 years later, the evidence only gets stranger. In southeastern Turkey, at a site called Göbekli Tepe, something was built that should not exist. Enormous stone pillars, some taller than a grown adult and heavier than several cars, arranged in precise geometric formations and covered in detailed carvings of animals. Foxes, vultures, scorpions, wild boars. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The scale is enormous. And whoever built it had no permanent homes, no farming villages, no cities, no state to organize the labor. For years, this made no sense. Why would nomadic hunter-gatherers coordinate the effort to quarry, transport, and carve 10-ton limestone pillars? What were they building toward? Then, archaeologists found the vats, large carved stone containers at the site, some capable of holding hundreds of liters of liquid. Residue analysis revealed fermented grain. Archaeologist Oliver Dietrich, who has spent years excavating Göbekli Tepe, has argued that feasting and communal drinking were central to why this place existed. People traveled long distances to gather here. They ate together. They drank together. And in doing so, they cooperated on a scale that produced one of the earliest monumental structures in human history. Alcohol, in other words, may have been the social technology that made large-scale human cooperation possible in the first place. By 7000 BCE, the recipes were becoming sophisticated. At an archaeological site called Jiahu in the Henan province of China, ancient pottery jars were found containing chemical residue from a fermented beverage. Researcher Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania analyzed the compounds and identified rice, wild grapes, honey, and hawthorn fruit, all deliberately combined and fermented together. This is the oldest confirmed multi-ingredient alcoholic recipe ever found. And it wasn't simple. Whoever created it was experimenting, blending, refining. They weren't just drinking. They were crafting. By the time ancient Egypt was building pyramids, alcohol had become so fundamental to daily life that it was used as currency. Workers on the Giza Plateau, the laborers who quarried and hauled the stone blocks that became the Great Pyramid, were paid partly in beer. Records uncovered by archaeologist Mark Lehner's excavations near Giza show ration lists including large daily allocations of beer per worker. It wasn't a bonus. It was part of the wage. Because in a world where river water carried disease and clean water was never guaranteed, fermented grain was one of the safest things a person could drink. The brewing process killed pathogens. It added calories. For a laborer working in extreme heat doing extreme physical labor, it was practical fuel. It also carried meaning beyond the practical. In Egyptian theology, the god Osiris was credited with teaching humanity how to brew. Beer appeared in temple rituals, in offerings to the dead, and in medical treatments prescribed by physicians. A single fermented drink was simultaneously a salary, a medicine, a sacrament, and a survival tool. So take a step back and look at the full timeline. 10 million years ago, your primate ancestors evolved the biological ability to seek out and process alcohol. 13,000 years ago, humans were deliberately brewing before they farmed. 12,000 years ago, they were possibly gathering at stone monuments built specifically around communal drinking. 9,000 years ago, they had refined, multi-ingredient recipes. 5,000 years ago, entire economies and religious systems were organized around it. Alcohol didn't arrive late in human history. It may have shaped the direction of human history entirely. Every time you pick up a drink, you are not doing something modern. You are doing something ancient, something biological, something written into your body by 10 million years of evolutionary pressure. The container changed. The ingredients changed. The setting changed. But the impulse, that pull toward fermentation, toward the warmth of it, toward what happens when people drink together, that is the same impulse that sent a primate reaching for overripe fruit on a forest floor long before anyone had a word for any of it. You just have a better cup now.